Hi everybody, I'm Randy. This is the Literate Texan, a place where we can talk about books, highbrow, lowbrow, anything in between. Today I'm making a response video to a video I saw over at Mark at Book Time with Elvis's channel, and it was called Why So Many Booktubers Quit. Okay, so and his video, in fact, was a response to a video from Shelley Swearingen, which was also interesting and worth watching. I'm going to link to both of those in the description below here so that you can watch both their videos, and I recommend them both to you, especially if you're a booktuber and you're thinking about quitting, or you're curious why so many other booktubers seem to disappear. You know, we've got some insights over here. And I've got some insights and some opinions too. And this isn't a one of those videos where I'm going to contradict Shelley or I'm going to contradict Mark, either one. I'm going to chime in and agree with them on just about everything, okay? But I do have some opinions about why booktubers quit, and I do have some ideas on how to avoid the situation that causes most booktubers to quit, because I'm firmly in the camp that believes that booktube is just a heck of a lot of fun. It's been been a real blessing in my life since I started doing it, and as some of you know, if you watch the channel for a while, I've been ill. You know, I was diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago. And, you know, I've been looking for things to do with my time that I'm really going to enjoy because, you know, I understand that my time is really valuable. And time is one of the subjects that Shelley touches on in her original video too. But she seems to think, and Mark followed these three broad categories too. I'm going to also follow them, that there are three things to think about when you're considering why most booktubers quit. The first of these is evolution, failing to evolve. If you're failing to evolve and change and grow as a booktuber, you're liable to quit. The second thing was the algorithm. If you're getting frustrated because you're not seeing the kind of success with the YouTube algorithm that you think you deserve, then you're more likely to quit. And then the third one is booktube itself can cause you to want to quit. And there's so many opportunities to do so many cool things at booktube that it's very easy to get lost in those, but it's also easy to get lost in the competitiveness of it. So I've got some ideas and some tips about each of these, but I'm gonna go in the same order that Shelley and Mark did, and I'm gonna talk first about failing to evolve. Okay, so this is, not every booktuber is going to start and stop this way either, but this is one of the common patterns that we seem to see, is that someone reads, okay, and, you know, reading's kind of a solitary habit for most people. Then they find an opportunity on YouTube to discuss books and literature with other like-minded or not like-minded readers, but it's an opportunity to socialize with people and make other people part of your reading habit, which is great. It's wonderful. And so you start getting involved in some of the things that make booktube so special. For example, you might get involved in buddy reads. Buddy reads are a real special experience because usually it involves you and one other booktuber. Sometimes it might involve a couple other booktubers reading the same book on a similar schedule and then discussing it. You might be discussing it on Voxer. You might be discussing it via email. You might have phone calls. I mean, any kind of, you know, there's not a lot of rules about a buddy read other than usually you're reading the same book together. That's a fun thing to do for a lot of people who've never had the opportunity to do it, especially because even if you live in a town where there's a lot of literate people and there's a lot of people who read, they don't necessarily have the same taste that you have. For example, I live in a college town. I live in Denton, Texas. And there's a lot of readers here for certain. But, you know, how many of them are into what I'm into here? You know, I'm a big fan of classic literature, and I've started reading a lot more of it. And so it's pretty easy to find people around here who are interested in classic literature. But what about science fiction or horror literature? You know, there's less of a market for that here. There are fewer people here to talk about that with. And then, you know, let's suppose I'm really into Westerns, for example. Well, there's even fewer people around here who want to talk about Western novels with me. And you can kind of tell if you go into like a general bookstore with a lot of different genres and categories on the shelf, like recycled books and records, by the size of those categories, how popular they are. You know, the classic literature and the contemporary literature sections takes up a whole floor at Recycle Books. Science fiction and fantasy, on the other hand, only take up about half the floor. And that's the two categories combined. Horror fiction, you know, is even smaller than that. You know, it's just a couple of bookshelves. And then, of course, they've got the antique ones, too. But yeah, different towns have different interests when it comes to books. But the thing about Booktube is there are no boundaries to cross geographically to talk about these things. If you're interested in classic horror fiction from the Victorian age, for example, you can find someone else who's interested in it here on Booktube without a whole lot of trouble. And you might not have such success in real life finding those people. So what happens is you get real excited and you do buddy reads. There's also group reads, book clubs, events. Okay, so you know, group read is where it's like a buddy read except with multiple people. An event is something that a whole mess of people are involved in. Garbage just is an example of that. Criminology does that every August, where you intentionally read garbage, but not necessarily bad garbage. But then there's also October is Victober. It's a huge Booktube event where we read Victorian literature, and I've decided to jump into that with both feet this year. So you can look for a lot of Victorian related content on the channel this month. But yeah, you get excited about this stuff and you get involved in all these events, and suddenly you're overwhelmed, okay? Because you got involved in too many events. There's not enough hours in the day for you to be able to accomplish everything you want to accomplish, and you wind up making commitments and feeling pressure because, oh, I've got a buddy read with this person, but I've also got a buddy read with that person. There's just not enough hours in the day to get enough reading done. Well, there's a solution to this, of course. One of the solutions is to stop this problem before it ever starts, and you can do that by getting an idea of how much time you have to devote to your hobby and how much you can get read during that amount of time. And the only way I know of to do that is to log and record things. And I've had a lot of fun since I started logging and recording the data about my reading, because it turns out I read on average about 3 hours a day right now. A little bit more than that, more like 3 hours and 15 minutes a day. But also I've learned that I read at about 40 words per minute, which is slightly below average. And it's funny because people think that I read at an above average speed, but it's not true. I just read a lot. But once you've got those numbers, you can kind of figure out, okay, I'm only able to read for an hour a day, and I can only read 40 pages for an hour. So in 7 days, that's 280 pages. I can only read about a book a week. And that's if the book's 280 pages or shorter. You know, if it's more like 350 pages, I need a little more time than that even. And so that limits, you know, how much you can accomplish in a month of reading, whether it's involved with good group reads, whether it's involved with buddy reads, whether it's involved with special events. You know, you go into it with an idea of this is what I can do, and then you do it that way. Now, if you've already made the mistake of getting over-involved and over-committed, well, this is where the evolution comes in. This is where you have to take a step back and take some things off your plate strategically. Mark, for example, points out that he's had to take some extended breaks from YouTube, and we see that fairly regularly too. And Shelley mentioned that also, that you'll see a booktuber take a long break, and you don't know if they're coming back or not. And well, of course you don't know if they're coming back or not because you don't know what's happened to them. I had an experience. You know, I have most of my booktube friends on Voxer, and we stay in pretty regular contact, me and the ones that I'm closest to. But you know, I've had some health problems, and I missed, you know, and I'm not consistent about when I make my videos necessarily. And I had a friend who was absolutely convinced that I died. And so she started contacting some of my other booktube friends, and she got in touch with Steve Donahue, who I talk to every day. And she got in touch with him, and he said, I promise you he's not dead. And she said, no, I think he's dead. I haven't heard from him. And he said, look, I talked with him this morning. He's alive. So, you know, when you're thinking about just dropping off YouTube, if you do, it's probably a good idea to say goodbye to everybody and let them know that you didn't die. You know, an even better route to take is just to cut back on the number of videos that you're pressuring yourself to make. You know, it's better to make a monthly video than to disappear forever. is what Shelley and Mark both pointed out. But even just sporadically making videos on an average of once a month, it doesn't have to be anything rigid like on the first Monday of every month or anything like that. Although there are advantages to that type of consistency too. But anyway, that was the first point, is evolving. And usually that evolving means getting better at managing your time and your level of commitment so that you're not stressed out about your booktube hobby. Because it's supposed to be fun, okay? You're supposed to be enjoying this. If you're doing this to try to make a living, you're barking up the wrong tree. And that's probably the topic for another video. But I do think it's a great idea for you to decide what your goals are before launching your booktube channel. If you've already launched your booktube channel and you weren't sure what your goals are, now's probably a good time to sit back and examine your goals and get real specific about what it is that you're doing here. I was having a conversation with Steve this morning about something, and he asked me, he said, man, he said, you're making a classic mistake here. He said, are you chasing the algorithm, or are you going to chase real people? You know, are you trying to give the algorithm what it wants, or are you trying to give real people what they want? And I pointed out to him that I thought that was a false dichotomy. You can do both. I don't think there's any reason you can't please the algorithm, quote unquote, for lack of a better way of expressing it, and please your audience at the same time. Now, there may be some choices where that seems impossible, but I don't think so. I think you can optimize for YouTube's search algorithm and its suggestion algorithm and please your audience at the same time. I think that's certainly something you can do. The second thing was she talked about was the algorithm, which I've segued into nicely already. The thing is, some people get really frustrated that the algorithm isn't sending them as much traffic as they feel like they deserve. Well, here's the thing I want you to keep in mind about YouTube and BookTube is you don't deserve, quote unquote, any traffic at all. You're not owed free traffic, okay? Businesses spend a lot of money marketing to get an audience, okay? So the fact that you're picking up an audience at all just by virtue of the content that you're creating is just really a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing, and it's a gift. You need to look at every subscriber as a gift. You need to look at every page view as a gift. Every comment, every interaction with your channel, that's a gift. And that's a gift whether you're getting 10 page views on average per video or 10,000, okay? Most people think they're gonna get on BookTube. Well, some people think, I shouldn't say most people. Some people think they're gonna get on BookTube and they're gonna be, quote unquote, the next big thing. And, you know, the chances of me ever actually competing with someone like Jack Edwards are just minimal. You know, I'm never going to have, I think he's got, what, 1.5 million subscribers, 10 million subscribers, something like that. I'm never going to have his audience. I don't want an audience that big. I don't need an audience that big. I don't appeal to that many people. But I appeal to the people that matter. I appeal to the people that I appeal to. And they're the ones that matter. So, but yeah, you know, that being said, you know, you can still pay attention to the algorithm. You can still try to crack the code on what's going to send you traffic. It's not impossible. Mark is a firm believer that it's all luck. Okay. Well, I will admit that some of it is luck. Okay. Yeah, you got to get lucky with the algorithm, but some of it can be decoded a little bit, if nothing else, just by imitating someone else. I have a friend who had a video that went viral, and he started getting 1,000 page views per day on it, and that continued for about 40 days. So in 40 days, he had one video that got 40,000 page views. Now, to some booktubers, that's not a big deal at all, but for a small fry like me, that's huge. My channel as a whole, with 250 videos on it, probably only has 200,000 page views since it began. So what I did was I went and I copied his video fairly closely. I used a slightly different topic. His book was about books that people don't read anymore, classic books that people don't read anymore. Mine was just 6 of my favorite classic books. And some of that, catering to the algorithm there, is just catering to what the people want too. People love to look at lists. They love to know what your favorite books are, and classic books are a perennially popular topic on YouTube. So I made the same video, but I made my thumbnail look almost exactly like his. I used the same number of words in my title, and then my description tag was very similar to his in certain specific ways. And I did not see the kind of success that he saw. I didn't see 1,000 page views per day. What I did see, though, was a video that outperformed 244 of my other videos on my site. I've got 250, 260 videos on my site. And that particular video where I copied his video that went viral is the number 4 or number 5 most watched video on my channel, mostly because of algorithmic recommendations. So yeah, the algorithm is there, and it is there to be cracked, and it is fun if you can figure some of it out. But chances are, unless you're doing this full time and you're really, really smart, you're not going to figure out the algorithm in such a way that you're going to duplicate Jack Edwards kind of numbers. It's just not likely for most people. But you can pay attention and have fun with it. The trick is to lower your expectations for what you're expecting from the algorithm. And that ties back into what my solution to number 1 was, the whole overwhelm thing. You need to temper your expectations in terms of how many things you're going to be able to commit to. Okay. The third thing that she was talking about was Booktube itself. Okay. And specifically what she was talking about in her video, Shelley, was that people get competitive, and competition and competitiveness is the thief of joy. Okay, so if I'm comparing myself to other booktubers, I'm making a mistake, and it would be easy for me to go look at Christopher Russell, for example. He is a relatively new booktuber. He's been on for 3 months, maybe 4 months, maybe even 6 months. I don't know, but compared to me, he's relatively new to this. Okay, I've been doing this for 2.5 years. But he already has more subscribers than I do. And the amount of interaction that he gets with his videos compared to mine just look pitiful in comparison. Okay? But you know what? Those people that are interacting with my videos that I'm talking to, I'm enjoying talking to my audience just as much as he's enjoying talking to his audience. I can promise you that. I enjoy it. I love it. And so, yeah, you can sit here all day and compare yourself to other booktubers and compare your numbers to other booktubers, looking at your analytics and trying to figure out what they've got that you haven't got. Is this person better looking than I am? Well, probably. Most people are better looking than I am. Is this person well-spoken, more well-spoken than I am? Probably. Most people are more well-spoken than I am. Is this person more widely read than I am? Well, yeah, chances are. I'm not really very good at any of this stuff. So, I'm convinced that every single bit of success that I have is just a gift. It's just a blessing to me. And I'm not here trying to make a living, but if I can make a few extra bucks on the side, it's definitely going to make it worth my time. But even if I weren't making it, even if I didn't have the opportunity to make a few bucks on the side here, I would still want to do this. And tying money to it doesn't turn it into a job that I hate. It hasn't yet anyway. But I've started putting together a Patreon page so that people who like my channel and want to support me can send me money. I think it's a wonderful voluntary economy that is worth participating in. But y'all forgive me, I got a piece of ice in there. I'm on medication that makes my mouth dry. That's why I'm drinking on camera. Forgive me. So falling into that trick of comparing yourself to other booktubers, you got to take that with a huge grain of salt and a really good attitude, because I compare myself to other booktubers. I like to look at ratios. I like to look at how many subscribers per video a certain channel gets. How efficient are they at converting their videos into subscribers? And it's interesting because my channel's not particularly efficient at that. I get maybe 1 new subscriber for every 5 videos. But, I know other booktubers that I've looked at, they seem to get 1 new subscriber, 2 new subscribers on average per video, which blows my numbers out of the water. But that's one thing that I can control is how many videos I'm publishing. The more videos I publish, the more subscribers I'm going to get, period. That's just how that works. But don't spend a lot of time foolishly comparing yourselves to other people unless it's fun for you. And that's the thing about all this, chasing the algorithm, comparing yourself to other booktubers, comparing how much you read compared to other booktubers. All of that is fine until it starts making you unhappy. But if it's making you happy, if it's upsetting you, if you're thinking about quitting because of these things, then you need to take a step back and rethink these things, okay? So why do most booktubers quit booktubing? I don't know that there's a scientific answer to this because it's a small segment of YouTube to begin with. And I don't know anybody who's out there doing any kind of scientific exit surveys for the people who are leaving. I just know what people are saying, and I know what people are saying who get frustrated. And I tend to agree with Shelley and Mark that those are the big reasons is they're comparing themselves and they're competing. Comparison and competing and putting pressure on yourself. That's not what this is supposed to be about. I think if you make your goals for success clear from the beginning and you keep those expectations and those goals low, then you're going to be more likely to succeed on BookTube and not burn yourself out and quit. And that should be everybody's goal, right? Is to have fun with it. And obviously, if you don't enjoy your experience on BookTube, quitting is always an option. But I just can't imagine wanting to quit BookTube. It's just been so much fun for me, and it's such a boon in my life. I read more. I have more friends. I'm having more fun. This is just terrific for me. And I hope it's the same for you. But I want to thank Mark at Book Time with Elvis and Shelley Swearingen both for giving me a cool video and a cool idea to respond to. I hope that something I said made sense. I know I tend to ramble. They've even called me Rambling Randy in the past. But I've got more videos coming on other subjects that may or may not be as interesting as this one. I'm going to ask you to come back and look at those too. But be sure to watch those videos down in the description. And if you've been on BookTube but quit and want to leave a comment down below about why, I would love to hear that. If you're on BookTube now and you're thinking about quitting, I'd also like to hear about that too. So please leave that in the comments. And then until next time, folks, stay sexy, stay hydrated. Both are really important. They'll make you happy too.